I will be asking for input and your ideas. So when we do that, please drop your comments in the chat section there, and so we can have like a conversation. Yeah. So so from Australia, traveled the world, went backpacking for a year, arrived to Thailand. That was about 20 years ago. Worked in hospitality for 10 years, where I worked my way up to be a general manager, leading a team of a couple of hundred people. And then about 10 years ago, I moved up here to Bangkok, Thailand, to pursue my passion for coaching and training and facilitation. About 2 years ago, Christy and I, we set up Coachology, and we provide training and certification programs throughout Asia in 15 different countries. Clearly, a lot of things are moving online right now. So the great news is that forward-thinking companies are engaging us to develop their teams online as well. So we've got some webinar series for some of our existing clients. We're doing what would normally be a full 2-day workshop with a client. We're breaking that down into online modules as well. Because guess what? This is becoming the new normal. Right? Rest assured, there is no old normal. We're not going back to that way of doing life and business. So when I say it's an opportunity to create our new future, I really, really mean that. And this is an opportunity for us to create something new and exciting in your life and business. So without further ado, let's jump into the content for today. So let's have a quick look at the agenda, what we'll be covering today, 90 minutes, a turbo review of last week's key learnings. It's really, really great to see some familiar faces. I see about 20 or 30 people so far that have joined us on some of the other webinars. For those joining for the first time, we're going to do a turbo review of last week. We're going to look at the importance of creating self-discipline in ourselves as a leader, and then how to develop that discipline even more in ourselves and in others. We're going to look at making your bed and keeping your agreements, your must-have skill as a leader, and leading by example as one of the best ways to create results with your teams. How can you inspire your teams to be more engaged? And the biggest mistake that we want to avoid as a virtual leader, and also top tips for leading teams virtually. And then finally, effective virtual delegation. So delegate, not dump. We'll expand on that, and top tips for virtual delegation. And before we jump in a little further, guys, I just want to kind of remind you that a lot of what we're going to cover today, it's not just virtual, right? And I'll just say this straight, if your leadership is not so strong at the moment, your virtual leadership is going to be even weaker. So what we're going to cover today is some general leadership tips with a few extra tips on how to develop your leadership virtually. But just remember, if you've got a lot of work to do on yourself as a leader, doing it virtually is just going to make it that little bit more challenging. So rest assured, these tips today are for your face-to-face leadership and for your virtual leadership as well, with a few specific little tips on how to do it virtually. So very, very quickly, change. The definition of change is to make or become different. Well, we don't live in that world anymore. We want to make or become better. That is our purpose, and that is my wish for everyone on this call, is we don't just change to be different, we change to be better. And this is a unique opportunity in the history of man to create your future. Right? And what we covered last week, which was breaking through from boredom to brilliance. That was our topic last week. You can find it on YouTube. After today's webinar, I'm going to send everyone an email with access to our YouTube channel, so you can catch those previous webinars, and you can catch today's webinar as well if you want to review it again, or if you need to leave early or miss anything, that's totally cool. So last week we discussed that emotions are a signal from our subconscious mind that are basically telling us what we are focusing on. So emotions are a signal from our subconscious mind that give us a clue on what we are mentally focusing on. Now, why does that matter? Well, basically here you are on the left-hand side. You've got negative emotion below the line, and you've got positive emotion above the line. When you focus on what we don't want, the little circle with the red through it, the no entry, that when we focus on what we don't want in our life, then that creates those negative emotions of boredom, anger, worry, fear, anxiety, concern, depression, and all those negative emotions. They come up from the subconscious mind. That's where our emotions reside. That's where they come from. So if you're not sure what your thoughts are moment to moment, observe your emotions. And if you're experiencing more negative emotion than positive emotion, then that's a clue that you're focusing on the wrong things, that you're focusing on the things that you don't want in your life. You're focusing on, oh, what about my business? Or what about my career? Or what about COVID? Or what about this? And I don't mean to be ignorant or disrespectful. What I mean is be aware of the situation so that you can begin to focus on what you do want. And when you begin to focus on what you do want, that's your target. That's the solution. That's where you want to be instead. And as you focus on what you want in your life, your goals, your ambitions, your desires, whatever it is you want, you'll have then a corresponding emotion that gives you a clue on what you're focusing on. So when you do focus on what you want, you'll feel love, you'll feel creativity, you'll feel feelings of peace or happiness or fulfillment or growth or excitement. Those emotions are giving you a clue that your focus is moving in the right direction, right? So your emotions are like a barometer. It kind of gives you a clue as to where our focus is. So if you're experiencing more negative emotions than you want, change your focus. Begin to focus on what you want instead, those feelings of abundance. Yeah. Then we talked about becoming brilliant with your belief systems. So let's take a quick look at our belief systems and how that works. So we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as we had the day before. And this is all backed by neuroscience, right? These aren't just random numbers that I'm picking up. By the way, your reference for that is Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Deepak Chopra, all have evidence regarding these numbers. 70% of most people's thoughts on average are negative thoughts. In other words, people are focusing on what they don't want. Repetition of those thoughts. So when we have those thoughts again and again and again, that creates a neural network. We have these neurons in our brain. A repetition of thought creates a neural network. And we call that neural network a program or a habit, right? A well-formed neural network. So that thought becomes automatic. That hardwired network becomes our belief systems. In other words, what we believe to be true about life. Now, beliefs aren't necessarily true. They are not a fact. However, with that repetition, and if we can have either limiting beliefs or empowering beliefs. There's only two kinds of beliefs at the end of the day. Limiting beliefs hold us back. And that might sound like something like, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not smart enough. I'll never get a new job. I can't start my own business. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too tall. I'm too short. Whatever it is, with enough repetition, that will become your belief systems. And those were some examples of limiting belief. An empowering belief is, I can do it. I am awesome. I am intelligent. I learn easy. I live in abundance. Money comes to me easily and effortlessly. And we covered all of that last week. So take a look at last week's YouTube video if you want to see that. Now, most of the time, those programs, those habits, those belief systems are unconscious, meaning that we're not quite aware of them. Now, why is that important? Because our belief system determines how we perceive the world. In other words, it's like a lens on how we perceive the world. So if we're perceiving the world through limiting, it's like looking through a lens with scratches and mud and rocks and everything, and it doesn't look clear. We don't see the world as it really is. So as we install empowering beliefs, we see the world as it is, which is an amazing, abundant place. Now, we also covered the best tool to install an empowering belief is called an incantation. And an incantation is simply a positive statement that you repeat over and over again using your senses, your emotions, and your physiology to install an empowering belief. Again, take a look at the YouTube channel for that. Why is that important? Why is an incantation important? Well, the thoughts that we have moment to moment, those 60 or 70,000 thoughts, together with our body, our physiology, there's a synergy that's created between our thoughts and our body. And that synergy is what we call our emotional state. In other words, the emotions that we feel moment to moment are a combination of our thoughts and our body. That synergy is our emotional state, or our feeling in this moment in time. Our feeling, how we feel in this moment and this time, leads to our behavior. And our behavior is simply our actions or what we do. And why is that important? Because what we do achieves our results. So check this out. The most important thing on this slide right now is that your emotional state, your energy, your emotion is directly linked to the results that you achieve. So in other words, if you have low or negative emotions, your behavior, your actions will be kind of like, yeah, and then therefore your results will be, pretty average, right? We've all had that experience when you've woken up in the morning and you kind of like wake up on the wrong side of the bed. You kind of growl at everyone, and it's just a horrible day. And then we've also had the opposite, where you've woken up, you know, full of energy, full of beans. You could be in the Bangkok traffic jam and you don't care because you're in a good mood. You're hi, right? So that's your emotional state, and that's going to determine your behavior and your results. So what I'm saying is, you don't want to leave that to chance. You don't want to just wake up and feel a certain way and then that determine the rest of your day. You want to manage your emotional state. How? By managing your thoughts, by reprogramming yourself with empowering beliefs. Because why? Your emotions create your results. If you want better results, if you want a better job, you want to grow your business, you want to start a business, whatever it is, you need to elevate your emotions, and then you'll get better results in your life. Cool. So emotional state, your ability to manage your emotions. So that's the turbo review of last week. Let's jump into developing your discipline and your delegation as a virtual leader. One of the must-have skills that you need as a leader, whether you're an online leader or an offline leader, you're doing it virtually or face-to-face, especially at this moment, the number one must skill have that you want to have is the ability to create certainty in uncertain times. Clearly, we're living in uncertain times, uncertain, unfamiliar, unknown. Your job, if you're a leader or if you aspire to be a leader at some point in the future, your job is, you, with your teams, you must create certainty. As you create certainty, even in an uncertain world, you empower your teams to basically get on with the work that they need to do. Whatever it is, whatever, it doesn't matter what industry it is, it doesn't matter whether you have 1 employee or 100 employees. Your job is to create certainty, right? Now let's think about the opposite of that as a clear example. If you, as the leader, let's say you're having a team meeting, again, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, and you are freaking out because of the COVID and because the drop in sales and because of this going on and that going on, and you're expressing your uncertainty as a leader, that is not going to build confidence or morale or positivity. It's not going to empower. So your low energy is going to lower the energy of the team. And then they will be coming up with excuses like, oh, we can't do it, boss. Or no one's answering my phone, boss. Oh, it's impossible, boss. Oh, I'm scared. I'm worried. I'm concerned. I have fear. So please, during this uncertain times, is do your best to create certainty for your teams. And again, I'm not talking about being ignorant or burying your head in the sand. I'm talking about just creating an extra level of certainty that no matter what's going on, team, we can do this. We will find a way together to navigate these uncharted territories. So please, guys, moving forward, whatever level you are in your leadership role or you aspire to be a leader, that's what your teams are looking for. They're looking for a leader that they can depend on, that they can trust, that's going to motivate and inspire and lead them through these uncharted waters, just like the lighthouse. Yeah? So self-discipline, let's take a look, because I believe this is one of the keys in effective leadership. Again, whether you're online or offline, is your own self-discipline. So dictionary definition: the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. The ability to pursue, to follow, to do what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. That's the technical definition. Let me show you a little video here now, guys. You should have sound for this video. Let me quickly check. Yep. It's about a 1.5 minute video. You may have seen it, you may not have. Enjoy.
To me, basic SEAL training was a lifetime of challenges crammed into 6 months. So here are the 10 lessons I learned from basic SEAL training that hopefully will be of value to you as you move forward in life. Every morning in SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they'd do is inspect my bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers would be pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed.
Oh, I love that video. When I was thinking about what videos to use, that video came straight to mind. So let's take a look at a little bit of the science about what's going on there. So basically what he's saying, these Navy SEALs look like hardcore men and women, right? Warriors, as he said. One of the first things they're tasked to do is make their bed to perfection. And let me explain why this is important. So first of all, we have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. Very simply, your conscious mind is what you are aware of moment to moment, and your subconscious mind is what we are not aware of in this present moment. Our subconscious mind is the realm, one second there. Yep, okay, sorry there. 5% of our conscious mind, 95% of our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind is where those habits, those programs, those beliefs and perceptions live. It's also the domain of our emotions and all of the bodily functions that happen automatically. Your heart beating, your air breathing in, breathing out, and all of that. Now, we spoke about this 1 or 2 webinars ago about the importance of engaging your subconscious mind to create abundance in your life. That was, I think, 2 webinars ago. So normally when we write a SMART goal, and I'm sure most of you have heard of the concept of a SMART goal, that's a very conscious process using the 5% of the conscious mind. But what about the 95% of the subconscious mind that's going to help you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve? And take a look at that video, appreciation, abundance, and something else to get the full deal on that. But for the purposes of this, the purposes of becoming more disciplined is the more disciplined you become, the greater the connection, the synergy between your conscious and your subconscious mind. So clearly, when you're working towards achieving a goal, whatever goal it is for you, personal, professional, relationships, business, whatever, You want to use 100% of your mind, not just 5%, not 10% or 20%. You want to engage a full 100%. And as you engage the full 100% of your mind, are you more likely to achieve your goals? Absolutely. So the question is, how do we integrate? How do we connect and use the full power of our mind? And the answer is keeping your agreements, right? Keeping your agreements. So what do I mean by that? And this was something I learned about 20 years ago at the very, very first personal development seminar I attended in Australia many, many years ago. And the facilitator told us the power of keeping our agreements. And I never quite understood the science behind it or the mechanics behind it until I learned NLP, until I became a professional coach. That the science or the mechanics behind why keeping your agreements works is like this. When you say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it. So for example, I'm going to meet you tomorrow at 3 p.m. for a coffee, but then I don't meet you, right? What happens is I'm breaking an agreement. 1 second there while I quickly mute everybody. Thank you. Okay. When we have an agreement that we're going to do something and then we break that agreement, whether it's an agreement with yourself or whether it's an agreement with someone else, what is happening? You're severing the connection between your conscious and your subconscious mind. So if you have the habit or the program of breaking your agreements or not keeping your agreements, then there's a lack of trust, or you don't have the relationship between your conscious and your subconscious mind. So what you want to do, and regardless of the past, this is not the time to be guilty or blaming or anything like that. We can start right now by setting an agreement and keeping your agreement. When you keep your agreements, every time you keep that agreement, every time you do what you say that you're going to do, you're re-establishing the rapport, the relationship, the synergy between your conscious and your subconscious mind, right? Because your subconscious mind, that 95%, it's like a 4-year-old child. So it doesn't know right or wrong, good or bad, past or future. It only knows right now. So when you consciously say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, it's like the 4-year-old child going, but you said you were going to do it, right? Now imagine that with a relationship between a parent and a child. Clearly that's going to break the relationship. So now you've not engaged that 95% of your brain power, of your mind power. So what we want to do to become more disciplined, like the Navy SEAL said, is one example is to make your bed. So when I attended this workshop many, many years ago, I decided my agreement that I made with myself was not to make my bed, and you can choose whatever agreement you want, right? The purpose is you want to choose an agreement, any agreement that you can keep every single day for a period of time. You choose the length of time, do it for more than 2 or 3 days, make it a month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And make that agreement and keep that agreement no matter what. And what you do, like the Navy SEAL said, even if you've had a really crappy day, things didn't work out, if you've done one thing right, you kept that agreement. And what that does is it reestablishes the connection with your conscious and your subconscious mind. Therefore, you're engaging that 95% of yourself to achieve your goals. The benefits are you trust yourself more. You have greater self-worth and a ton of other benefits by keeping your agreements. Now, initially, we're talking about agreements that you make with yourself, but also agreements that you make with friends or colleagues or associates or contractors or clients or customers. If you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it, because your subconscious mind is always listening, right? So you want to keep your agreements. And if you want a little bit more information on that, you can read an amazing book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements. It's an easy read. It's about 100 pages. And again, his book, it was based on Toltec traditions, which is a civilization from about 3,000 years ago. There were 4 agreements in this book. One of them is be impeccable with your word. Impeccable means like precise, right? So be precise with your word, because the spoken word creates your reality. Now, we can take this down a long metaphysical rabbit hole if you like, or you can just focus on keeping your agreement and be impeccable with your word. If you say you're going to meet a friend at 3 o'clock for a coffee, meet them at 3 o'clock for a coffee. If you say you're going to have a report or a task complete by this date, make sure you have it complete by that date. Now, if you're a leader, you have the leadership hat on. If you say that you're going to give some information to your team, or you're going to complete a task for your team, make sure you complete your task when you say that you're going to complete your task, right? Because not only are they depending on you, your subconscious mind is always listening to you. So this is your self-discipline and your discipline as a leader. And I believe we have a question. Yep. Very good. So if others are not keeping their promise, for now, guys, don't worry about other people. You can't control them, right? That will be in a separate topic about perhaps how to deliver feedback to your subordinates. For these webinars, I want you to focus on what you can control. You cannot control the COVID situation. We cannot control the government lockdown. We cannot control that they extended the alcohol ban for 10 more days here in Thailand. There's many things that we cannot control. What you can control is your response to what is going on. That is a great question that we'll pick up on another webinar, or if we have time today. There are effective ways to deliver feedback, and we'll cover that a little bit later. For now, what you could start to do is if your environment, in other words, the people around you are not good at keeping their promise, at keeping their word, at doing what they say they're going to do, if you see that a lot in your life, it could be a clue. I'm not saying definitely, but it could be a clue that you need to do your push-ups, that you need to do the work on yourself first, right? Because we've heard the saying, be the change you want to see in the world. So if you want more discipline from others, be more disciplined yourself. If you want other people to be on time, you be better at being on time. If you want people to keep their promises, you keep more of your promises. That's the first place that you're going to start. Now, if it continues or it's just one person, yes, you would give them feedback. So please, take a look at this book, The Four Agreements. It's an easy read, super, super powerful. Be impeccable with your word. So top tips for self-discipline. So in a moment, and in fact, you can start doing it now. What do you do to help keep yourself disciplined, right? I'd like you to start popping those in the chat below. I'll share some of mine, what's worked very, very well for me. Be on time. Always, as much as you can, as often as you can. Because when you say you're going to be there at that time and then you're not, you're breaking that agreement with your subconscious mind. So simply do your best to be on time always. If you know you're going to be late, send the person a message. Give them a quick call. Hey, I'm running late. You've done the right thing. Okay, so do your best to be on time always is a really good exercise in self-discipline. Set yourself small, manageable daily agreements. So when I learned this technique 20 plus years ago, it was just as I was leaving Australia to go backpacking. And so I had set an agreement with myself that I would do 20 push-ups per day, no matter where I was or what I was doing. So for one full year, I backpacked around the world for 1 year. I left Sydney, Australia, and I backpacked, and my last stop was Thailand, and then I just happened to never go home. Every day, every single day as I was backpacking it, and I was staying in a hostel, I was staying at friends' places, I was sleeping on the couch, I was, in a dormitory with 20 other people in it. Every single day, without fail, I would do my 20 push-ups. When I felt sick, when I'd only had 3 hours sleep, when I was working, when I was out partying, whatever, it wouldn't matter. I would always, always, always make it important to do my 20 push-ups. Yeah, and what that did, I developed such a trust with myself. My conscious and my subconscious were totally aligned. And on that 1 year backpacking adventures, the synchronicities, the coincidences, the amazing opportunities and the people that I've met, I could not have dreamed of the possibilities. So I knew that I was creating these experiences way beyond what I could think was possible. And I know it was because I kept this one daily agreement for 20 years. For 1 year, as I was traveling around the world for that 1 year. I remember once I was in Ireland and I was living on the west coast of Ireland in a beautiful little town called Galway. And me and some friends, we rented a car and we drove up to Northern Ireland, about 3 hours away. We visited Northern Ireland and we were driving back to where we were staying. And all of a sudden I was driving and I went, and I remembered I'd not done my push-ups yet. And I looked at the time and it was 11:50 p.m. So I pulled the car over to the side of the road. I left the headlights on and I went out in front of the car on the side of the road and did my push-ups on the side of the road in the middle of rural Ireland. Now, my friends thought I was crazy. They said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I have an agreement with myself." And I felt so good and I felt so proud that I was able to keep my agreement no matter what. Yeah, I was doing it in the dormitory between a bunk bed and a bunk bed at 5 o'clock in the morning before I had to go to work on a construction site. So what you want to do here, guys, is set yourself a small, manageable daily agreement. Don't make it so big that you're going to set yourself up to fail, right? Don't make it something like, I'm going to go to the gym 8 days a week for 2 hours, right? It's too big. It's impossible to achieve. You won't be able to achieve something so big. And what will happen is you won't keep your agreement and then you won't feel good about not achieving your agreement. So make it bite-sized, making the bed. Let me give another 1 or 2 examples before we share. Another way to keep yourself disciplined, guys, is use your calendar. I'm sure everyone has access to a Google Calendar or iPhone calendar, whatever they call that. If you're going to make an appointment with someone or you've made an agreement with yourself to do something, don't just leave it up to this one. Use the technology to help you, to remind you to keep that agreement, whether it's a self-agreement or agreement with someone else. What else? Please, Christy, what other agreements do we have written down there? Yeah, planning, prioritize, delegation, schedule. Yeah, and to do that regularly, right? What else? Journal. Yeah, a journal's a good way. So a journal's a perfect self-agreement, right? My agreement is to write in my journal every day. That's a really good way to build your muscle of discipline and to connect your conscious and your subconscious mind. It's really, really easy and very insightful as well as you write and read back those journal entries. Yeah, schedule a to-do list. Yep. Oh, a quick tip on a to-do list, guys. You can have a big to-do list with like 80 different items on it. That's cool. What my recommendation is each day, simply choose 3 or 4 items on a to-do list that you must get complete today. So you've got your big to-do list. Capture everything as it pops up, but then each day, either in the morning or the evening before, capture the top 3 or 4 that you're going to do today that are a must. Yep. What else? Wake up early. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So you guys are getting the point, right? Here are a few more. This is a really good one. If you want to install a new operating system, and again, we talked about limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs. If you want to install more empowering beliefs, my suggestion is as soon as the alarm goes off, leap out of bed. It doesn't matter what time you set your alarm for. It can be 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. I don't mind, whatever time. The point is, most of us are really good at snoozing. But here's the thing. Here's what's happening neurologically when you hit snooze. Number one, you hit snooze. As soon as you wake up, your old programs are booting up. Just like when you boot up your computer in the morning, you know how it takes like a couple of minutes before you can actually use it? It's booting up. The default operating system is booting up. Exactly the same thing happens for you when you're waking up in the morning. Your default operating system, those limiting beliefs, those limited perceptions, they are booting up. So even though you've hit snooze and you may drift off back to sleep or you may not, you'll be in that kind of half awake, half asleep state. Your default operating system has already booted up. So what you want to do, you want to hack into the operating system. One of the best ways to hack into the operating system is as soon as you wake up, as soon as that alarm goes off, you throw back your covers and you leap out of bed. Right? Now, I'm not saying it's easy. You'll probably bounce off the wall and you'll be kind of like, oh, this is difficult. But that is the time to keep your daily agreement, right? Whether it's journal writing or doing, 10 push-ups or making the bed or having a cold shower or playing with your son or your daughter, whatever agreement that you've set for yourself, do that as soon as you wake up, because now you're rewiring a new empowering behavior. You're connecting the conscious and the subconscious mind so that you can attract more abundance and attract those goals into your life. You may want to determine what consequences you'll have to pay by not doing your agreement. So in other words, if your agreement is to do 20 push-ups, you might tell your husband or your wife or your friend or your partner, look, if I don't do my push-ups, I'm going to pay you $20, right? So you might want to link some pain or consequences if you don't keep your agreement, if you don't keep your discipline. Again, be realistic. Don't try and set those agreements to be too big. Try and keep them bite-sized and easy to achieve, because like the Navy SEAL said, that making the bed, that's a win for the day. That's the first task complete that will flow on to other tasks being complete and other tasks. And if nothing else works out, at least you did one thing really, really good that day. So be realistic. And in terms of work, it can be quite beneficial or really good self-discipline to start your day with the most difficult task first. Get it done, right? And then everything will be a lot easier as you go through the day. Cool. Excellent. So moving on. So here's traditional leadership, the boss sitting on the top, cracking the whip. And of course, we need to have the modern day leader needs to lead by example, right? And this is really, really important. And of course, this flows on to being disciplined, right? If you want your teams to be more disciplined, you need to be more disciplined first. If you want them to be more creative or more proactive, you need to be more creative and more proactive first, right? So we must lead by example. So why is leading by example important? Let us take a look at another little video here that explains it nicely.
There's an interesting story about Gandhi where one day a woman and her young son went to go visit him. And this woman had a son that was addicted to sugar. And nothing she or anyone else could do would get this boy to stop eating sugar. Doctors told him to stop, friends told him to stop, family members told him to stop, nothing worked. So she figured, I'll go visit Gandhi, and him being the wise and pious man that he is, my son will surely listen to him. So she waited for a long time to go visit Gandhi, and when she finally gets the chance to meet him, she says, Gandhi, please help me. My son is addicted to sugar. He's not listening to anybody, but he'll surely listen to you. And Gandhi looks at the woman, he looks at the boy, and he says, very well. Come back in 2 weeks and we'll see what we can do. The woman was a little confused because she thought, why do I need to come back in 2 weeks? But nonetheless, she did. 2 weeks later, she returns back with her young son and she says, Gandhi, remember me? My son is addicted to sugar. Please tell him to stop. And Gandhi looks at the woman, he looks at the young boy again, and he says, son, you should stop eating sugar. And the woman was very confused. She looked at Gandhi and she said, "We were here 2 weeks ago. Why couldn't you just have told him that then?" And Gandhi says, "Well, because 2 weeks ago I myself was addicted to sugar. And how can I tell somebody else to stop doing something when I am doing that same thing?" And I think this is a great story about this concept of leading by example. Oftentimes inside of our organizations, we have managers and executives that have certain expectations of other employees inside the organization. And they want those other employees to exhibit certain behaviors, but rarely do those managers and executives themselves exhibit the behaviors that they would like others to demonstrate. And so I think that this is a great story and something that managers and executives should really take to heart, because if you want other people inside of your organization to act and behave in a certain way, start with yourself and see what happens.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it links back, guys, to having that self-discipline for ourselves. It links back to walking the talk, and how can we expect others to follow a certain behavior or to do a certain task if we ourselves are not willing to do it? It's simply not congruent. So as much as possible, we need to lead by example. That is our job as a leader. And as we do so, essentially giving other people to permission to do the same. So leading by example is important because it's walking the talk. Now, our employees, our staff, our subordinates, in a certain way, they are always looking at us. They're modeling our own behavior. They're almost like children in the sense that, whatever our teams see us doing as leaders, they are going to replicate and follow and copy, or what we call model, our behavior. So for example, if we are continuously late as a leader, then we're basically giving the message to our teams that it's okay to be late because I'm late. And we've all worked with those leaders who it's like, don't do as I do as I say. No one wants to work with a leader like that, right? So just be mindful that your teams are always observing you. And when you walk into that office, whether it's, face-to-face or virtually, your role as a leader, you have to be on, right? You have to turn on a switch, no matter what is going on in your personal life, what's going on with your family, or the drive that you had to work, or the Wi-Fi connection, or, your own fears or concerns about the uncertainty that's going on out there right now. You can't bring that into your team environment. As a leader, we have to step up and we have to walk the talk. And whatever behavior we want our teams to demonstrate, we must demonstrate it first so that they have a role model. They have someone to follow in terms of improving their behavior. So they're always watching us. Whether we are consciously aware of it or not, our teams are always watching us, right? It's congruent. So what do we mean by congruent? Congruent kind of means like aligned. So when we, as the leader, are congruent, when we are walking the talk, when we commit to do something and then we do it, when we say we're going to do something and then we do it, we create congruency. And that's a feeling, right? That's an emotion that other people can sense and other people can feel. So on the flip side, here's an example. The leader, you're in the middle of a meeting and the leader says something like, listen, it's really important that we're all here on time for this meeting, right? It's just not okay to be late. Then you go to the next meeting a couple of days later, and then the leader turns up late. That is not congruent. And either consciously or unconsciously, everyone else in that meeting is going, oh, right, okay. So it's okay for you to be late, but it's not okay for the rest of us to be late. We're not leading by example. It's not congruent. And that gives a negative feeling when we as leaders are not congruent. right? So the more congruent you are, the more impeccable with your word, the more disciplined you are, it creates greater congruency. And that simply creates a better feeling, a better energy, a better emotion in the group. And it could, because it creates greater synergy and teamwork. When you lead that by example, then other people are more likely to role model you and to follow your example. Do we have some other examples, guys? Can someone else tell me, please, why is leading by example important? Who else would like to share? Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. You will earn the respect. Okay, so there's have you ever seen those cowboy western movies where there's a town in the middle of the wild west, and there's cowboys and horses and Indians and Native Americans and all of that kind of thing going on. And the sheriff has the badge on, right? Says that I'm the sheriff. And anyway, the sheriff somehow dies or he's out of the picture. And then someone gets the sheriff badge and they put the badge on and they say, right, I'm the sheriff in this here town and you better do as I say, boy, right? And no one likes that sheriff, right? Like that sheriff is a douchebag and no one likes that sheriff. So we need to be mindful as a leader that just because we have the title of leader, we should not expect that everyone is going to do everything we say all of the time. That's only level 1 of leadership, that you have the title or the position, but that's a trap. And I'm sure we've all experienced working with people like that who kind of walk around like a little bit of a peacock. I'm the leader. I'm the big boss. Do as I say. Don't do as I do as I say. No one likes to work with a leader like that. So please don't be that leader. Right? What you want to do is move from level 1 to level 2 of leadership, where you build the relationships with your team. And it's through those relationships, it's through supporting your teams that you build the respect, right? By being disciplined, by leading by example, you will build the respect. Yes. Yeah, a living testimony. Remember, they're always looking at you, whether you're aware of it or not. Your team are always looking at you. Well, when they can see you. Yeah, gain trust, be an idol, be that role model. Yeah, please, yeah, don't perform as some Hitler or, yeah, I do as I say, not as I do. Maybe 20 years ago, you could get away with that leadership style where you lead with a big stick. Sadly, guys, it simply doesn't work anymore. Sadly, it just doesn't work anymore. Yeah, leave your legacy, right? It's one of the most profound things you can do when you're moving on from a company, right? You decide to move on to another company somewhere. Leave it better than when you found it, right? Leave it better than you found it. You go out on a high, you can leave your legacy. You can feel good about that for years and years and years, right? So one more. A question, yes, please. Yes. Yeah. So leadership vulnerability, absolutely, I agree. Leadership perfection doesn't exist in my map of the world. All we can do as a leader is to do your best, right? And by the way, that book that I mentioned before, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, the second agreement is always do your best, right? So be impeccable with your word, always do your best, because you can't do any better than your best. All you can do is your best. And perfection according to who, right? Perfection is a fantasy. So your role as a leader is to become a better version of yourself as much as you can. Be vulnerable, absolutely. Not to the extent, though, of creating uncertainty in your teams. Remember, your role as a leader is to create certainty in uncertain times. But you can be vulnerable. What does that sound like when your team asks you a question? You could say this, try this. What a great question. I don't know the answer to that. How can we find out an answer to that question? That's being vulnerable, right? It's admitting your truth, okay? And then you have a conversation with your team on how to find the answer for that amazing question that they just asked, yeah? Now, on the vulnerability of leadership, that's coming up in next week's webinar. So I'm glad someone brought it up. Thank you very much for whoever that was. So leading by example is important because we don't like it when someone else doesn't lead by example with me, right? So I'm sure we've all had that example. You've had a boss in the past who does not lead by example. We simply don't like it. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel congruent. So again, we know what we don't like, so don't be that leader on your leadership journey. When you lead by example, it leaves footprints for others to follow, right? And that will create more certainty. Yeah. So basically, as you forge the path, you're creating a pathway. You're leaving footprints for other people to follow your lead. That creates more certainty, more confidence, more creativity, more teamwork, and more synergy. The biggest mistake virtual leaders make. I would like to hear your input, guys. Let's have 30 seconds. Please put in your comments what you think is the biggest mistake virtual leaders make. And by the way, guys, what am I sharing here? These are just my experiences. I'm not saying that this is the truth. I'm saying this is my truth. And what might be true for me might not be true for others. I'm just sharing on my 20 years of leadership experience. Yeah, going too fast, not keeping in contact. What else do you think is the biggest mistake a virtual leader can make? Ego, beautiful. Ego is our topic next week, guys. I'm glad that someone brought it up. You guys are 1 week ahead of me. You're bringing up the things we're talking about next week. Ego is a big one. What else? What else? Not engaging with your team. Not clear communication. Oh my goodness. Yep. Exactly. Yep. No empathy. So in a nutshell, which pretty much aligns with all of these comments. Yeah. Silence. Yep. Silence. In addition to those awesome ideas you just shared, taking credit, the ego and everything, the biggest mistake a virtual leader can make is silence, right? By not communicating, by not engaging. Remember, what's different between when you're in a face-to-face in say an office environment versus what we are now working remotely, working virtually, is when you're face-to-face, there are many interactions throughout the day or many opportunities for your teams to connect with you. Whether that's walking from the car park into the office, whether it's at the coffee machine, the water machine, or walking to or from the bathroom, whether it's at lunch or passing each other in the office, you have multiple opportunities to connect with the leaders and the teams. Virtually though, you don't have those random opportunities to kind of bump into your leader and ask him or her a question, or to bump into your subordinate to check up on them, or how are you going with this, or how are you going with that. So the biggest mistake that any leader can make is by just silence, by just sitting in silence and hoping that everything will magically work. Not present, right? Silence is another way to say that. Breaking the agreement, exactly, yeah, which links back to discipline and being impeccable with your word. You're just commanding, do as I say. Right, so let's take a look here, guys. There are two main tips that I want to share and expand on a little bit today in terms of engaging your teams virtually. I mean, clearly number one is to not be silent, right? Because that silent treatment, if you just talk on a Monday and then you have a 5-minute conversation on a Friday, don't be surprised if your teams are not achieving their results. So the two main tips that I want to focus on to engage your teams virtually are: agree on communication strategies. Now, if you haven't already done this with your teams that you're leading virtually, or guess what, even if you are part of a team and you have a leader, you can mention this as an opportunity to improve the communication within your team, right? So what do I mean by agree on communication strategies? And first of all, let's look at that first word, agree. So a few of you mentioned in the chat just now that, you know, we don't command or tell or be a Hitler on our teams on the way that we're going to do it. So you don't just want to say to your team, okay, listen team, we're now working virtually. This is the way that we're going to communicate. Here is the list. Follow this list. Follow this standard operating procedure. That doesn't work in today's society, in today's teams, in today's way of leadership. So you want to agree on some communication strategies together with your team. If you haven't done this yet, or there's opportunity for improvement, you might suggest a meeting with your teams. And remember, this is even if you are part of a team where you have a leader, where you feel there's too much silence or not enough communication or not enough engagement, you might say, hey team, how about we have a meeting on this day at this time so that we can agree on communication strategies so that we can achieve our goals and serve our customers better. Right? And then you have the meeting. Now, during that meeting, here are some of the things that you will discuss and agree. Now, again, if you have any other additional tips on elements of the communication strategy, then please share them in the chat. So what you'll agree on is the kind of frequency. So in other words, how often will you communicate with your team? So let's imagine though, for the moment, you are the leader and you have a team of 10, for example. You will need to agree on how many, remember frequency means how often, right? So in a regular work week from Monday to Friday, and if your work is different, you just make the adjustment. How often are we going to have team meetings? How often will you want to have one-on-one meetings? Whatever that is for you, you will agree together with the team. Remember, you're talking about what is best for the business, right? You need to focus on your business and you need to focus on the customers when you're deciding how often we should communicate. Not if it's what you feel like doing, not what you think might work for you. What does the business need? That's what should determine how often or how frequent you have these conversations. You'll also need to discuss what platforms you want to use. Are you going to use Line Messenger, WhatsApp Messenger, Facebook Messenger, email? Are you going to do Zoom chat, Microsoft Teams chat, or some other platform? You will need to agree with your team what platforms are best in what certain situations. You'll also need to agree on the duration. Right? So you might limit meetings to 20 minutes. You might limit one-on-one sessions to 10 minutes. You might have a once a week, 1 hour session. Whatever that is, you're going to agree it together. And I don't know the best practice for this because I don't know everyone's specific industry or how many people you lead in your team. That's why you want to do it as a collaboration with your team to work out what is best for your industry and your team. Right? Yes, Christy. Question. How to do it in the virtual situation? Well, what we're doing right now is an example of how we can do it in the virtual situation. So, for example, you can use Zoom. I'm using a program called Zoom. There's a free version available that allows you to have meetings for up to a duration of 40 minutes, 40 minutes. So you can register for free. You can have access to the Zoom, and just like everyone received a link today, your colleagues just need to click that link, and voila, everyone can come onto the call, right? So whether it is Zoom, whether it's Skype, whether it's Microsoft Teams, there are multiple ways to use it. I prefer Zoom. I have the Pro account. I've paid money for this for obvious reasons, and I can host up to 500 people on a call for an unlimited amount of duration of a time. I can record it. We have these chat functions and so on. With our corporate clients, I can do breakout rooms. So I can be facilitating a group of 20, for example, and then split them into 4 or 5 or 10 virtual breakout rooms. Yeah. So, you just type in Google virtual meeting software. Right? You'll need to agree what is your urgent communication strategies, right? So for example, what we've agreed here in my company at Coachology, if something is urgent, we pick up the phone and we make a telephone call. That is our agreed communication strategy if something is urgent. If something is less urgent, we have a group chat online that all the members of the Coachology team have a line group chat, right? So anything related that everyone needs to know can go into there. That is less urgent, right? But then we do have an agreement that when we start our business day, we'll check emails and we'll check line messages and check any other messages first thing in the morning and then again at the end of the day. So you just need to agree these things in advance, because if you don't agree them, you'll have a certain expectation as a boss, yet your teams won't know what your expectations are, and then therefore they're most likely going to break your expectations, and then you're going to feel upset, or you're going to have some kind of emotional reaction because they didn't do what you hoped that they would do. So the way to clarify that is to agree these communication strategies in advance. So how do you communicate things that are urgent? How do you communicate things that are non-urgent? You might have a Gantt chart, which is kind of like an action plan. What else, guys? What are some other things that you need to consider when you're considering communication strategies? Have we missed anything there? Right. Now, remember, as you're writing some answers there's no right or wrong way here. You simply need to come to an agreement with your teams, right? So, for example, another strategy that works, something that we're doing here at Coachology, on Monday morning, every member of the team is sharing a bullet list overview of the tasks and the duties that they're going to focus on this week. So for the next 5 days, this is what I'm going to do. For the next 5 days, this is what Christy are going to do, and the other members of our team. And we just put that into our group chat that we use Line for. So then we know what other people are focusing on during the week. Now, do other things pop up? Of course they do. But we know that each one of us is going to come back to those items that we listed on the list. And then sometimes we update that daily as well. Whatever you agree, at least then everyone is on the same page and there are clear expectations. Yeah. And this is a good way to keep your discipline. So if you want your members of your team to send you a list of what they're going to do either for the week or for the day, you better make sure that you send your list first as the leader to lead by example. Yeah. Now, the second most important thing in engaging your teams virtually is agree on how to measure effectiveness. So again, we've got this word agree there. Why? Because it's going to be a discussion. You're going to have a discussion with your team and you're going to agree how to measure their effectiveness, right? Now, what do I mean by effectiveness? That can be things like KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. We might have due dates for certain tasks. We might have project milestones, which will determine the effectiveness. We'll have project completion. Thank you for whoever's drawing those on the screen. I'm not sure where that's coming from. We're going to look at urgent versus important. And we're going to look at prioritization. So these are all things that you need to consider when you're measuring the effectiveness of your team, right? Because let's be realistic. If you're working virtually, you're not able to kind of easily look over the shoulder or to see what your teams are doing or not doing. So again, you need to agree in advance And that might be open as a conversation, right? Maybe you don't have a lot of experience with KPIs or, you know, project management software or things like that. And someone mentioned that word before about vulnerable. Beautiful. You can sit down with your team and say, hey, listen, Fred, you know, we're working virtually now. This is going to be like this for at least the next couple of months. I'd like us to have a discussion on how we can, you know, measure the effectiveness of the daily and weekly tasks that you're doing. And I think we should have it as a discussion to work out, you know, how are we going to measure your output and the things that you need to do, and, you know, how are we going to communicate effectively. So that's a beautiful conversation that you can have with your teams. It's kind of like a coaching conversation, really, where you're not telling them what to do, you're inviting them to share what they think can work best for them. Now, it's the same with your communication strategies, right? Choose the strategy that works best for some of the individuals. You might have a communication strategy for the whole team, but what you do individually with your team members might be slightly different based on their preferred communication style. You might have people who say, look, boss, just call me on the telephone, please. I hate text messages. Just call me. Pick up the phone and call me. Whereas other people will say, well, you know what? I prefer WhatsApp. I would like us to communicate via WhatsApp, right? So it's a conversation that you have. You're kind of creating this new way of doing business together with your teams, right? So these are some great ways on how to measure your effectiveness. And again, depending on your industry, depending on your teams, you will need to decide which way is best for you. But guarantee, guys, if you don't agree on what you're going to measure, how will you know if your team has done a good job? How will they know if they've done a good job? Yeah, and you can link all of these KPIs or whatever they are to their yearly performance review. So here are some other top tips for leading teams virtually, and please feel free to share any tips that you have. As we mentioned, agree on communication and measurement strategies. Please pop your comments in the chat below. As much as possible, guys, when working with your teams, please, 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 when appropriate and when possible, ensure that they have their video turned on. Why? Because if they have their video turned off, imagine if you're in a face-to-face meeting, right? And someone is leading the meeting, and I'm in a face-to-face meeting and I'm doing this. Yeah. When it's not face-to-face, you miss an element of communication. So when you're leading your teams, and again, when possible, when appropriate, try and ensure the video is on, because both you as the leader and the employee will be much more engaged in the conversation. Make sure you have a great Wi-Fi connection and a backup, right? So we've got the Wi-Fi over here, and then I can connect Wi-Fi via the phone should the main Wi-Fi drop out. And it happens, right? Storms happen, thunderstorms, technology. Minimize your distractions, okay? So again, working virtually produces new challenges, but we've all been doing it for 3 or 4 weeks now. So we know you want to put yourself in a quiet space, move the cats, move the kids, and any other distractions that are going on. What else, guys? Has someone else got some other tips for us, please, on leading teams virtually? No other tips? If you've got some tips, be punctual. Yeah. Again, if you want to lead by example, if you're the leader and you say you're going to have a meeting at 3 p.m., make sure that you're on the call at 3 p.m. sharp, right? That you're standing by, ready to go. Be random. So what do I mean by this is, like when you're in a face-to-face office, when you're in the actual office and you're walking around and you work, you know, you're moving around the office, you kind of randomly bump into people and you meet them at the water cooler or the coffee machine or walking out to the car park or lunch or whatever. So you'll have meetings scheduled at this time or that time, but just randomly reach out to your teams, right? Just, hey, just surprise them with a video call, right? And just say, hey, look, just want to check in and say, hi, how are things going? Is there anything you need from me? Any support you need? anything I can help with, right? So just kind of be a little bit more random in the way that you engage with your team. And you may want to have your open virtual door policy, right? So open door policy that you can come in anytime. You may want to offer that to your teams as well. So you can just say to them, look, call me anytime. I use WhatsApp the most. Ping me a WhatsApp message if there's something urgent on your mind. I'm always available anytime. Yeah, and because, by the way, WhatsApp and Line, they have video function as well. So if it's just a one-on-one, you can be anywhere in your house, in your condo, and you can have that virtual meeting right there, right then. Yeah, smile, good energy. Remember, guys, even though it's virtually, let's imagine I'm the leader, okay? And it's our Monday morning brief, okay? And here comes Luke into the virtual meeting, right? 1 second. What kind of leader am I if I bring that energy into the meeting and I'm leading a team? I'm basically commanding, I'm telling everyone, I don't really care about you. I don't care about this job. We're doomed. Nothing is going to work and I give up. So please don't be that leader. Bring some energy into the space. Create that level of certainty. Create that, own it that you're a leader, right? And then you're going to help your teams navigate this uncertainty. Yeah, eye contact. That's why I try and look at this little dot on my computer here as much as I can. And that's why I have Christy helping me with the chats, because I don't want to be over here trying to read the chats. Proactive. Yes, we covered that in our PPP webinar about 3 webinars ago. Perfect. Oh, another little video. Let's take a look here.
Anton has joined the meeting.
While it may be astounding that we can have a virtual meeting with people on different continents, it can also be frustrating. And these frustrations can affect morale, engagement, productivity, and innovation. When changes in the ways we communicate lead to changes in how others perceive our communications, this calls for a new set of protocols and behaviors. Authors Erica Dewan and Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic have a few rules of thumb for communicating with remote teams. First, since clarity and consistency are key, sticking to a set of agreed-upon norms can help avoid confusion. This could range from a set of acronyms about expected response times to standardizing use of particular communication platforms. Next, remember that you can never be too clear. Unless you've established a shorthand protocol ahead of time, don't assume others understand your brevity. Take the extra time to be extra clear, regardless of the medium. Third, don't bombard your team with messages. Each time you email, text, or call, imagine that you are physically walking into your colleague's workspace. If you followed up an email by text and phone, it would be like opening their office door 3 times in a row. Minimize your digital volume and think wisely before hitting send. Fourth, notice that team members who are more introverted in person can really benefit from written communications. Physical barriers can actually level the playing field for those who may be less inclined to speak in group settings. Lastly, find ways to celebrate and socialize remotely to strengthen relationships between team members and improve collaboration. Even a simple switch from conference calls to video, for instance, can boost rapport and create empathy. The challenges of remote teams will not disappear, but creating consistent rules, rituals, and protocols will go a long way in building a new communication skill set.
Anton.
Wonderful. Makes sense, right? So again, it's to agree and design your communication strategies together with your teams. Find some best practices, what works for you. Every industry and every team is going to be different. So simply choose one that's going to work with you and then keep your discipline around those agreements. And by the way, if you need to change it, what do? You have a conversation with your team and you work out something better, different strategies that's going to work for you. So today's final topic is on delegation. So dictionary definition, the act of giving a particular job, duty or task to someone else. And by the word particular, I think the word specific would go very, very well. The art of giving a specific job, duty or task to someone else. So clearly, guys, we want to ensure that we delegate effectively, not just dump, right? And what is dump looking like? Dumping looks like this. Okay, yes, I need you to take care of this, this, and this, and here it all is. All the information is in here. I'm going to check back at the end of the month, and I'm sure you'll be fine. Okay, bye, and then off you go. New leaders will fall into that trap often because we don't know how to delegate effectively. Just know that it is a trap, right? That we overwhelm our teams too much, and we're not clear or specific enough when we're giving the information to our teams. So let's look at the correct way on how to delegate. 4 steps to delegate. And again, this is what's worked for me, guys. There are hundreds of other videos and tutorials specifically on delegation. I just want to share what works best for me as a business owner and having managed hundreds of people over the years. Well, first of all, you need to know what you're going to delegate. Right? And by the way, just so you know, most leaders are not very good at delegation. Most leaders, regardless of their position, right? Remember, the higher you go in an organization, the better you need to get at delegation. So if you're not sure what to delegate, the first thing you need to do is simply make a list of all of your current duties, all of the tasks, any projects or any areas where you spend your time, where you use your time. You need to make an inventory. You need to make a list of that first. If you just kind of randomly pick out things off the top of your head, you might be missing more important tasks that could be delegated, right? So first step is to make an inventory of everything that you do, and you can do that over the space of 1 week. Right, as a leader, right? Just make a note that you're doing this, you're spending 30 minutes on this and an hour on that and 2 hours on this, whatever it is, no judgment, it's just making an inventory of what it is that you do. Then from that list, you're going to clearly identify which of those tasks can be delegated and to who you're going to delegate. Now, again, there's a lot of information on Google. You can look at, what tasks should I be delegating. I'm sure you've seen the prioritization grid with urgent, important, planning and dumping and those kinds of things. So, look on those other resources to identify which tasks to delegate and then who best to delegate them to. One way that I'd like you to think about this, though, and this worked very well for me personally, imagine that you're about to be promoted, right? The boss has come in and said, Luke, congratulations, I'm going to promote you in 1 month. I need you to delegate and hand over your duties to your number 2. So now you have to think, oh, wow, oh, okay. So now you will suddenly have to delegate a lot more. In fact, everything that you are currently doing. So I want you to think about it from that perspective, to think about as if you were going to delegate everything, who would you delegate it to and which parts specifically would you delegate to? And I believe we have a question. Yes. Okay, we'll come to that. How do we do the accountability and basically the monitoring is what we're talking about. We'll get there in a moment. I'll come back to those questions in a moment. Thanks for the questions. So remember, guys, who you delegate to, it could be your subordinates most of the time, but it also might be your peers, right? Or you might need to outsource some of those tasks. It might be more beneficial for you to outsource to a contractor or a virtual assistant or something else outside of the organization rather than trying to do it in-house. It's with some tasks. Delegate the task clearly, by sharing all of the details and the expectations, right? So when you're delegating a task, delegate it in its entirety, and you need to explain it very, very clearly. For example, let's say you're the leader. Your kind of awareness, your consciousness, your ability to perform is up here. Generally speaking, your subordinates don't know as much as you. Generally, not always. So remember, their level of understanding is not at the same level of understanding as you. So what does that mean is you need to explain things in a way that they understand clearly. That task might be a task or a repetitive action or task that you've been doing for 1, 2, or 5 years' time. So you know it inside and out. But for your subordinate or the person that you're delegating to, it might be the very, very first time that they're, understanding this skill or this task or this behavior that you want them to do. So go slow, communicate clearly, and show them all of the details, and be really, really clear on what your expectation is from them delegating the task. So remember, you're delegating that task for a specific outcome. So make sure you clearly communicate what is that outcome. So then they have all of the information, which will be more likely to create success. Then, coming back to that question here, is check back as often as is needed and support as required. Now, this is a balancing act. You don't want to be looking over their shoulder every 5 minutes, and you certainly don't want to wait 1 month before you check back in on them. So initially in the early days, you will check regularly, and then that will get less regular and less regular and less regular. And when you're checking back with them, make sure you're asking, do they have any questions? Do you need any support? Are you having any challenges, right? So you delegate a task, check the next day, right? Then leave a day, then check another day, right? So that'll be a gap of 1 day, and then a gap of 2 days, and then a gap of 3 days. That's a general rule of thumb, right? So what you're doing is you're not looking over their shoulder. Remember, it's to be supportive. And you need to use a little bit of common sense too, guys. Remember, when you ask your subordinate, is everything clear? Do you understand? And they go, uh-huh. You know they don't get it, right? So that's your opportunity as a leader to support them deeper, right? To encourage a conversation to help them at a deeper level. Well, if the staff don't let you to check, I would ask who's wearing the pants, who's the real leader, right? So again, you would need to clearly explain that as you're delegating the task. So as you're delegating the task, you'll say, okay, please repeat back to me your understanding of the task, blah, 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 blah. They'll say, great. Then you'll say, okay, so what kind of frequency would you like me to check back with you on to offer my support? Remember, you're not like looking over their shoulder to check that they're doing things wrong. You're there to offer support. So if they resist your support, then this is nothing to do with virtual leadership. This is something to do with your leadership, right? You need to perhaps give that person direct feedback, or you need to do something else, right? Majority of the time, 95% of the time, your teams will appreciate being delegated to. Why? Because you're showing them that you trust them and you're supporting them to grow to the next level. Yeah. Now remember, we're going to cover delivering feedback in another webinar. So top tips for effective virtual delegation, or by the way, any delegation. If someone has some tips, please drop them in the chat box now. So follow the 4-step process. Have your subordinate repeat back to you their understanding of the delegated task or project. So it's really, really important that they clarify their understanding. Create the space to have your subordinates offer input and ask questions. What else, guys? What are some other tips for effective delegation? I think we've covered it all, but a few more important ones, please. You've got to learn to let go as a leader. Like, you've really, really got to learn to let go, and you've got to be able to mentor and coach them as necessary. And please, please, please trust yourself and trust them. Our teams are so much more capable than what we think. And you'll know this when you do get promoted and then suddenly you have to delegate everything. You'll be surprised at how eager and willing your teams will be to take on your responsibilities. Why? Because that's going to lead to their promotion as well. Yep. How do we do if they are lazy? Well, this is where setting up the, when you set up your communication strategy and when you're setting on the measurements, right? Because at the end of the day, guys, virtually, it's more difficult to manage your teams because you're not around all of the time. That's why you have to set those measurements, right? Some kind of KPI, some kind of due date. You have to be able to measure their output. That way, then guess what? If they like working in the middle of the night from 12 o'clock midnight through till 4 o'clock in the morning, that's okay as long as they get their output done. So that's why you need to agree those communication strategies and how you're going to measure their effectiveness, right? For laziness, take a look at some of the other webinars. For sure though, guys, the very, very first thing you need to do is you need to manage your own emotional state. Now, if they're not achieving their output, then you need to have a different conversation with them. You need to give them some direct feedback. And that sounds like a really good topic for next week. Yes, yeah, exactly. So you want to link whatever you're delegating into their performance review. And you need to remind them. And by the way, guys, being a leader is not being their friend. Being a leader is being a leader. So sometimes you have to have tough conversations with them. That's okay. And you need to do it virtually, then you need to do it virtually. Now, when these beautiful questions that we're having, how to motivate them, how to address them when they're becoming lazy, 95% of all of your problems will be solved through clear communication. Now, by clear communication, I mean clear and direct communication. So in wrapping up today, guys, whether you're leading virtually or face-to-face, you must develop the skill of clear and direct communication. Not like a Nazi, not like Hitler, not like commanding or yelling what to do, simply to be clear and to be direct. And if that direct communication means giving feedback, then that's okay. And we're going to cover that next week. So please join us next week. You'll get the invitation a little bit later. Another key skill as a leader, guys, develop your own self-awareness. So be aware of your communication style and continually work on your own EQ, your own emotional intelligence. Build rapport. Right, so rapport is trust and connection. How do we do that? Be more disciplined, lead by example, etc., etc. That will give you greater influence. So in other words, they'll be more likely to follow your instructions. And one thing's for sure, guys, as a leader, if you want to grow to the next level, constant growth and improvement for yourself and for your team. That is absolutely essential for your role as a leader. Your leadership journey does not stop. Yeah. And so that's wrapping up for today. These are the clients that we work with. We've got some live training coming up in July, which is the NLP leadership training. So this covers your communication, your EQ, giving feedback, and all of those tools. That'll be in Bangkok. We also have our ICF coaching program, which is great if you want to become a professional coach. And we're offering this program now online. We've been approved to facilitate this full program online. More details on that following soon. Our Thrive webinar series, and be the change that you want to see in the world, guys. Start with yourself is the very, very best way that you're going to get more results with your teams. So thank you all very, very much for joining today. I'm going to send an email out later. You can review the recording. You can share it with your friends. There'll also be instructions for next week's webinar, which based on your amazing comments today, we're going to cover on how to deliver feedback effectively. Yeah, so I'm going to unmute everyone. Please, everyone, make some noise. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to send you a follow-up mail, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in the follow-up mail, guys, there'll be instructions on how to access the recording. You'll get that by about 6 o'clock tonight, along with the invitation to next week's webinar as well. So thanks, everyone. Thank you very much. You take care now. Hope to see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks.
ขอบใจหลายๆ